Despite a bad hair day, I'm going to do this because it is a God-timed revelation concerning a prophetic dream that He gave me 13 months ago, which at the time I didn't know the meaning, and I said that in the video when I posted it 13 months ago. But God being God, His timing was today. It was today. In the last few hours, He has led me on revelation of revelation of revelation that gave me everything in one container, where I got the understanding of all the symbolism, and I got the confirmation that yes, it is indeed a prophetic message concerning the coronavirus, and not just concerning the coronavirus, but concerning a big problem the devil has put in there in the coronavirus in order to steal, rob, and kill those not meant to be killed. Now, this is something that needs to go around because the devil has succeeded to convince some leaders and some persons in the body of Christ that this is the Lord's will to actually go where it is not the Lord's will, where it is death traps. And so I am sharing that right now because it is an urgent revelation, and at the timing of the revelation is now. And now that the Lord has given me all the pieces, I'm going to take the moment right now to share it with you. First, I will establish to you the evidence that this is indeed a prophetic revelation that the Lord gave me in the dream, that it actually came when I said 13 months ago, because there's a lot of false things that happen on the internet. There was a lot of false news, there's a lot of false prophecy, and so it's important to establish that this is so. And so, people, sit down, because this is important. It's happening now, and what's happening now is the devil is deceiving people to take a dart through this coronavirus to lead them to deaths that are not the plan of God. And He, being God, gave this ahead of time to establish this message so that His children in the body of Christ can be armed, and we can stand up and we can walk in total knowledge and not perish. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, and that's why the Lord has worked this way. Hallelujah. All right, now let me share with you the information. It is a dream that I put on my channel called Dream Warning to Church. Many will die who do not have to die. Now, I myself had to wait, unknown to me, for this length of time for the Lord to finally bring things in His season that would give me the complete information for the revelation. But He has done it because the timing is His time, and it's pertinent now. And so I'm going to share it with you right now. If I didn't have this prophetic dream that I could show you took place 13 months ago, all this would sound to you was my opinion. My opinion, I'm telling you, that I'm pro social distancing, pro stay at home, and it would just bounce off you, because the Lord did this because it is not my opinion. He did this to make known that it is a divine revelation. It is the divine revelation. And even though I myself am, because I worked in a hospital in the 90s, and I was a part in the medical field, that I myself, from the knowledge that I had then, I'm pro social distancing, stay at home as long as it takes till the curve is flattened. However, that's separate from this. This is not anything to do with me. This is a divine revelation from God in a time when confusion has been sown. The church body is being divided over this, that God has planted ahead of time this prophecy to make clear the truth. And the truth is that going out to public gatherings now, when COVID has not flattened, and until it does, is not His desire. It goes against His will and will lead to needless deaths, which are Satan's work, because they are deaths that do not have to happen, over people who will have life if they don't do it, if they do not do it. So we have to stop this work of the devil, and the Lord already put this in place with the heart that it gets out, that it is the proof needed to show the revelation of God, that going to public gatherings to worship is a plan of the enemy. It didn't come from him. In addition, that this pandemic is not a end of the world sign. It is a pandemic, and these things arise from judgments that, as I have said, and I've shown biblically in my other videos, God has been giving judgments since the Garden of Eden. So judgments do not mean end of the world. But still, a lot of us, even myself, have wondered, is this one of the last day seals? But the revelation the Lord gave, no, it is not. It is a pandemic, but it is one that is not meant as end of the world. And also that there's going to be too many people dying if they disregard the warnings that don't have to die. So let me now show you the revelations the Lord gave me that confirm and completely interpret this prophecy, that will empower you and everyone in the body of Christ to have the knowledge, the divine understanding that the devil cannot influence you or deceive you to disregard what is most definitely God placed warnings not to gather. On the first Saturday of this month, I had a prophetic dream about a tremendous rain. I'm sharing with you here the article that the Lord led me to on the day last week where He gave me in one day the meaning to everything within that dream. Here I found the precise interpretation that gave the revelation to my dream, how the raindrops and how the flooding exactly is this coronavirus pandemic. A terrible rain that is going to cause many, many, many people to die.
Coronavirus in Nashville will be like a flood. It will take time and action to subside. By Dr. Brett Campbell, guest columnist. Published in the Tennessean, the principal daily newspaper in Nashville, Tennessee, at 6 p.m. Central Time on March 23, 2020.
And this rain, there is going to be some warning about some rain.
A medical doctor compares the coronavirus to the 2010 Nashville flood, which he and his family survived. Story highlights, Brett Campbell is a Nashville intensive care unit physician at St. Thomas West.
It is going to be such a tremendous rain that it is going to cause a great flooding.
Dr. Campbell wrote, "The current coronavirus crisis is not a tidal wave, it is a flood. Nashville has been asked to stay at home, avoid unnecessary travel, and stay away from large groups. But as I drive into the hospital every day to take care of the city's swelling population of critically ill, I see busy roads, groups of people walking together in parks, packed parking lots full of people trying to escape the boredom of self-isolation.
And people are going to die as a result of the flooding." The allegory that Dr. Brett Campbell wrote here is the precise interpretation of what the rain is in my prophetic dream.
To me, each of those face-to-face social interactions is a raindrop.
A lot of people are going to die who don't heed the warning. Particularly, I was shown there are going to be people at what appeared to be an airport where people were all waiting and waiting. This caption sums up the attitude that was in the people in the airport that I saw.
Miami Herald file photo. Photo caption: health officials say people should avoid flying right now if possible, but plenty are still catching flights.
Many people were milling around, as they are when they are waiting for planes. I didn't see any planes or anything else to know for sure it was an airport. But when I was seeing it from afar, it seemed I was looking at an airport that went down to lower levels. This building, I was seeing it from miles distance as the rain was pouring down. People were in lines starting from outside, going into the terminal, and all the people in that place. I knew waters were going to flood there, and they were just going to die. And people who were going to be out in church, in those churches in this area, they were going to die, most of them in these places. The rain was going to be that bad. In fact, I was in a church in that place during that rain. I was talking with the pastor of that church as it was taking place, and he was telling me a similar disaster that happened. But this one happened with a bear breaking into the church. The bear in my dream actually was just there for a symbol, a confirmation symbol, that when I would find a bear related to my dream was about, whatever that flood was, it had to somehow also involve a bear in the picture in an essential way. And the Lord led me to see on that same day He gave me every revelation that bears are indeed part of this pandemic's news in an AFP article written by Purnima Weerasekaara last April 2nd, 2020.
AFP by Purnima Weerasekaara, April 2, 2020. Activists slam China's use of bear bile in virus treatment. Purnima Weerasekaara wrote, China has approved the use of bear bile to treat coronavirus patients, angering activists, and raising fears it could undermine efforts to stop the illegal animal trade, which is blamed for the emergence of the new disease sweeping the globe.
As you can see from what this AFP article says, bears are not just incidentally tied to this pandemic, but they are actually playing a key role in China. They consider bear bile to treat coronavirus. And so when the Lord led me to this, I got my confirmation, seeing that bears are crucially tied in with the crisis, with this pandemic, that was my confirmation from the Lord. Here were the bears. Bears are part of coronavirus. And so that was the symbolic confirmation that the Lord planted in the dream that really didn't make sense and was actually a big red flag that when it was found, I would know for certain. Taking some corpses, and the people were warned of the coming of the bear to the church, but they didn't pay heed. Now I'm spending all this time confirming these individual things to you so that you will see the dream is actually fulfilled, because the message, it's a serious message, and it's a message that can save lives. And this is more than a dream. It's a prophetic dream, and it has come into play now. And that's why it's essential that I take the time to give all the confirmation so that the devil's way of getting people to turn from the truth and to stay in his plans of destruction will fail. And this was the same situation, that the people were warned and didn't pay heed. As this pastor was speaking to me about how this rain was like that bear disaster, one that could have been avoided if people listened, I was having a panoramic scope of that whole area, seeing the streets, the city, and the airport as if the church walls became see-through, and I was having a multi-camera live pan of the whole area, different parts of the land, which was all green as if summer, Green as this summer, and this photo that CBS has as their first picture, what do you see in the background? Green foliage, green trees, and this photo is taken on May 1st, 2020 in San Diego, California. It's a demonstrator pouring water on his mask as he pretends to drink from a bottle of bleach during a rally. So you see, here are all the confirmation when this attitude that is a a a serious mistake the church is making, that this prophetic dream is about, is at full force and happening, is when around the country in the United States, many places now have green foliage, verdant things, and this particular picture is a perfect representation of that. And getting a longer look at the structure that seemed an airport, where the most deaths would happen because of the large numbers of people there. And this New York Post article paints that scenario perfectly. Airline passenger describes packed flight to NYC, surrounded by people not wearing masks. And I asked the pastor, now listen to this question. This is the one where the Lord gave me the answer whether or not this coming event, months after I had this prophetic dream, was indeed an end of the world kind of disaster, whether it was indeed be one of the seals opening. Is this an end time rain, the end of the world kind rain? And he said, no, it was not, but it was going to cause a lot of people's death. And this May 19, 2020, Ledger Inquirer article confirms that Georgia church reopens, quickly closes again after several families get coronavirus, and were shown the families at the funeral, who, if they had paid attention, if they were listening, wouldn't have happened. And that's exactly what this Chattanooga station WTVC screen grab relates. Church members test positive for COVID-19, but they just went ahead with their plans. Exactly what crimeonline.com, March 30th, 2020, relates in this article by Ellen Killoran. 2 dead, 45 people infected after the choir holds practice amid coronavirus pandemic. And that took place in Skagit County, Washington, March 2020. And that is what happened here. They just went with their plans. Tragically, as this New York Post article shows, coronavirus has killed more than 70 New York City rabbis, priests, and ministers. They just went ahead and ignored everything and went about their regular plans out in these places that were low-lying. And this picture 35 of the CBS coverage of America Reacts relates what I saw also, people going about their regular business in the streets, going into the stores, into restaurants. And here we have this May 11, 2020, Mother's Day, a crowd of mostly unmasked people gathering at C&C, a restaurant in Castle Rock, Colorado. At this day, in May 11th, the coronavirus has been acting the same as it has 3 weeks ago. It is and continues to be a highly contagious virus. It doesn't take a day off or change its behavior because it is a holiday. Out in all the elements. And as this article in the newscom.au shows, just by going out in the same flight with someone who was infected, 2 women on the same flight contracted the virus. I remember feeling the panic of the situation when I was being told that. And that panic actually was reiterated in this article. American Airlines flight crams its only 11 passengers into last 3 rows. All the people in that airport, all the people in those lines, all those people out and about in their business, everyone was going to die. And that is what this Time magazine article captures so succinctly. We're definitely spreading it. Flight attendants fear they are losing the fight against the coronavirus. For certain, all those outside were going to die, as well as everyone inside that terminal. Now, at this point, I am not certain whether this is going to be a literal rain that is going to cause such a situation where so many people are going to die from the resulting floods, or if this represents the disasters that are coming on people, that many are going to die, who, if they heeded the warnings, if they paid attention to the signs, if they paid attention to the dangers, they wouldn't have died. The important message of the dream is that the way all of these people just completely and entirely, utterly dismissed and wrote off all the warnings they were being told, every single warning, and they just acted as if there was no consequences. That it is this attitude of indifference that is going to take all the lives of those people in one terrible situation. And that one terrible situation is just as shown here by the guidance for dental settings found on the CDC, which tells dentists here in this paragraph dealing with transmission that the virus that causes COVID-19, the thing that matters here is that the last couple of sentences, that the virus has been shown to persist in aerosols for hours and on some surfaces for days. And the important thing here, dealing with the situation of the church warning, is shown here by this group of researchers at Florida Atlantic University who took the time to show how far respiratory droplets from a cough can spread from COVID-19. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is while their studies showed how far it can go, and they showed how a cough can go up to 13 feet, but this is not really the paramount problem that has to do with the church warning. The church warning has to do with this next part that they illustrated, which is they're showing up now a person wearing a mask simulated on this dummy, and when the researcher expelled it as if a natural cough, you can see how it is going outside the mask. And what they saw is that there also leakage on the sides of the mask, and they were saying a mask helps. It doesn't have it go very far, but still what we're seeing is, as this researcher says here,
we did notice some leakage from the sides.
So when he says leakage, that leakage is actually aerosol particles that would be coming out. So we have church members here who are coming in told to wear masks, and keep in mind that the virus has been shown to persist in aerosols for hours, and that it can be spread by people who are not showing symptoms. So here is an article on Yahoo from HuffPost that says, some say if retail stores are open, churches should be too. Here's why it's not so simple, but the key issue is here is the photo that we see taken by Pat Greenhouse, where we see a couple here attending a service in First Lutheran Church in Boston on May 24th. They had to make reservations to attend, and we see here that the woman, if she had a mask, she pulled it down, and the man, he has a mask, but he's pulled it down on his nose. And the thing of it is this had been the second mass that took place that day, and before them had been someone in the very same spots marked off by the church, and one was a person who was not showing symptoms, who didn't realize they had it, and they made the responses, and they praised or they said amen. Those particles were still be in the very spots where this couple is right now for up to 3 hours, and unknown to them, while they open their mouth and they breathe in, they can actually get infected, because that's what happens with this infection, which is highly contagious. Highly contagious. And to define what that highly contagious means, I'm going to this article from the Daily Beast, recently written by Olivia Messer, titled "Disastrous Arkansas COVID Cluster Spells Trouble for Church Openings," where she quoted Dr. Erwin Redliner, director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia University and an expert on U.S. readiness for pandemics, where he said and pointed out with other clusters around the country have involved so-called super spreaders who may be more contagious than the average patient. The virus itself is infectious enough to be easily spread by anyone, even if they have mild or no symptoms. We don't even need super spreaders to create a significant outbreak, because the rate of transmission is so high, he said. And that is just how highly contagious this virus is. This is what makes it a super threat, and a reason why it's such a danger to disregard the things we can't see, act like they don't exist. And the results of it are going to be, as the Lord gave me in this prophetic dream. And that terrible situation will continue on in situations such as we see here on Sunday, May 17th, where we have a photo taken by Safwan Georges, the Washington Post, also in a Yahoo article. And the worshipers here we see participating in a service at Hopeful Baptist Church on Sunday, May 17th in Montpelier, Virginia. And the situation here, the terrible situation we have here, is we have the people have come in, they are following what the churches are telling them, which is to social distance 6 feet apart between people of different households, and to come in with masks. But we already see in the top balcony there are people who have foregone wearing masks, and perhaps the church believes by putting them up there 6 feet away that will keep everybody safe. Well, those aerosols, if any one of them is asymptomatic, who are not showing symptoms, and they actually have COVID ID, they have just put into the church infected aerosols that are going to hang around there for several hours, and they will fall over the time, and they will be able to infect people. So already we see here, in just the first few times churches are opening, the pictures that look to be idyllic pictures are showing holes in the safety net. People already are going in there, and they're either dropping their masks, taking them down when they're there, lowering them off their face, and continuing to be in the service, which may be a shock to some of the people over there. And then they're going to do things like this fellow over here. He has come up close to the pastor, the priest, and he has decided to lower his mask, open his mouth. And this probably has happened to you. When you open your mouth about to eat food, your saliva glands by themselves can excrete saliva that shoots out. You can't control that. And I'm showing an example of what that means by a video on the channel of Cardo Beast, who made a video with gleeking in slow motion. And gleeking is when you shoot out saliva, and people do that some people do it on purpose. And they made a video in slow motion to give you an idea exactly what will take place and has taken place before ministers who give communion in the hands of the parishioners to take, or themselves and maybe even have put it in the mouth of the parishioner. I'm sure they can recall times of this happening to them, and this can't be controlled. You cannot control it. We have a twofold problem here. We have a man who has decided to lower his mask within 2 feet of the minister giving that communion. We have a man who has decided to lower his mask at the point where someone else is going to walk up where he was to get communion. Now, if his saliva glands, when he opened his mouth in anticipation of that food, shot out saliva, as I'm showing the slow motion that was done by Cardo Beast, where he did a video showing gleeking in slow motion. This is exactly what happened, and it no doubt has happened numerable times throughout churches when someone has received communion, they have taken the communion and to put it in their own mouth. This is something that will happen every so often, and it can't be predicted or stopped. So when this person decided to lower his mask and he opened his mouth, at that moment he could have shot out, if he didn't know he was infected, aerosols. So the next person walking out into that space can walk right into the saliva. Maybe a small tiny particle can still even be there, and they can have it go into their eyes, or it can land on their clothes. It can land onto the hand of the priest. It can land onto the next communion host that the priest has in his hands right now. You see that priest? You see that communion host that is in his hands? If this man happened at the time when he opened his mouth, his saliva gland shot out saliva, it is a probability it could have landed on this host. So the next person can actually receive a host they put into their mouth that can have infected COVID-19. And there's no way they would have any idea and wonder how it happened. But these things that I'm pointing out to you, they are realities that are not being covered, not being acknowledged. And to have this kind of activity going on, this is the recipe for needless deaths. Needless deaths. The only way to avoid them is to continue to not gather in large groups, to avoid these situations, because you can't control individuals. You can't control, for instance, this fellow. This is very irresponsible. It is highly irresponsible, and it's also in ignorance of all the factors that are part of this contagious situation that has led to a pandemic. All the ways that this virus works, all the things that make it a potent danger. We're dealing with a pandemic. We're dealing with a new, highly contagious virus that has no cure at the moment. So we have here just 3 pictures from 3 churches representing serious problems in those pictures. They weren't meant to represent serious problems, but each one actually is showing gaping holes that are going to lead to the loss of all those lives who are not going to heed the warnings. They're going to walk into places where unpredictable, high-risk things are going to take place. Some are going to walk into place totally ignoring all the data out there about how the aerosols live for hours in the air, how they escape out the sides of the mask, how people without symptoms can pass on the infections, how this is highly contagious. It's not just contagious, it's highly contagious. And they're just going to continue on. Each particular church, some stopping after they have outbreaks and people perhaps dying, those will stop. But if you count the number of churches throughout just the United States, there's a huge number, and it's going to lead, because there's a lot of obstinacy, to huge numbers, as I saw, that are going to needlessly die. In fact, here we have in this other article posted in Today, titled Coronavirus Deaths Could Reach 200,000 by Early Fall, Harvard Doctor Warns. Now, he warned this because there was a spike, a great spike across several states since Memorial Day, after the coronavirus lockdown, the first lockdown, prompting health experts to worry about a second wave of the virus. And this is because, according to Dr. Ashish Jha, director of the Harvard Global Institute, that these are due to the softening of the measures and reopening too soon. He says that this theory doesn't explain the rise in hospitalizations in at least 9 states. And he projects that at best case scenario, if nothing changes from this point on, there are going to be 200,000 deaths by early fall. We already, at the time of this article was done, there was reported 113,000 deaths in the U.S. And this kind of mentality is what I saw in the prophetic dream. I saw a mentality, as has been recently displayed, of people going out about as if nothing is going on, ignoring entirely that there is a pandemic and that it's a potent killer with a secret weapon, a highly contagious one that is passed on by all kinds of people, mildly infected, those who don't even appear to have symptoms. And the Lord wants the church to be warned. He wants the church to understand it is not His will that people die. And He is giving clear message here in this prophetic dream that if you disregard all the warnings concerning the threat of this pandemic, people will needlessly die within your churches. They will needlessly die. And it went on further to show also in the entire community outside of the church, there are going to be people needlessly. And that's the whole emphasis of this prophetic dream. Needlessly. That means that can be prevented. Needlessly perishing. Needlessly dying. That means it can be prevented if the warnings are adhered to and taken seriously to the full extent that they need to be until the very end of this threat, which is going to go on for many months. And the tragedy of it is only because they simply hardened themselves. They were stubborn in their hearts, and they didn't want to acknowledge anything. And that's exactly what one of the daughters of a man who lost his life going back to work, that was covered about in an article in the Miami Herald this June 17th, she reported. Now this article is titled, Feels Like a Bad Dream, Returning to Work Amid Coronavirus Proves Deadly for Some. It's written by Brooke Wolford. And in this article, one of his daughters, Lena Washington, she spoke out saying what her father had told her. There was no social distancing, as he explained to me. There was no active sanitation, Lena told KTVK. This is what to listen to what she said. The arrogance that people think it can't happen to them. I'm telling you, it can, because it happened to me. And it didn't have to happen Listen to the echo of her words, exactly what the Lord gave to me in this prophetic dream. That these deaths, everyone is needless. They don't have to happen. Lena's father didn't have to die. But there is a prevailing arrogance, a prevailing hardness of heart that has led to and is going to lead to a myriad of people needlessly dying, rejecting all the warnings, rejecting every warning. And this is why the Lord has given me the interpretation at this time, so that the evidence, sadly, of it playing out is starting here. People cannot deny it. Some people still will deny. Because if I gave this 2 months ago, there would have been nobody open to it. But now it is playing out. And so the Lord has timed it that I get the revelation to give the information now when people are shaken up. They can now see the truth. They're seeing it play out. The spikes are rising. Numbers climbing from not heeding the warnings that the health officials have given, continue to give, to not go out, to not gather in groups. Yet there has been rebellion. They have received that dart of the enemy. This warning is coming out now so the church will listen and they will do a turnaround and stop going forth with reopening plans. Stop going forth in blindness that their strategies will help them to go ahead and gather. We are at the beginning of what is going to be a huge amount of people needlessly dying if people continue to harden their hearts and go forth with these reopening plans, continue to gather, continue to meet, think their strategies given to them by the blind, it's the case of the blind leading the blind, is going to work. We are at the very beginning of what is going to be a huge amount of people who are going to needlessly die. And I am not talking about the huge amount of people already set to die by the fall, by the numbers given by that Harvard professor. I'm talking about there's going to be a massive amount more added to this if the people continue to disregard the warnings, leave it up to individual businesses and churches to do as they decide, to interpret what is danger or not, while they harden their ears and their hearts from receiving what has been said from the beginning and which stands true to the end. There was no change of what was said, and that stands true to the end, that this is highly contagious, that the way to deal with it until there are vaccines and remedies that work and we are developed enough immunity is simply entirely not to gather in groups. This delusion of wearing masks and getting together side by side in enclosed buildings, even on the outside of the buildings, is just what it is. A delusion, an illusion that is going to just set themselves up for destruction. At this very same article was also posted another computer model showing how respiratory droplets are released when a person coughs with and without a mask. And it again reiterates what FAU researchers were showing, that wearing masks help, but wearing masks is not 100% protection. You see here the particles are passing through the mask all the same, and watch how a certain number go even as far as without a mask. It only takes one droplet to land in an open mouth, an uncovered eye, on one's nose, on one's hands, where they will touch themselves later with it, to become infected. The only way you deal with a high contagion is you don't allow the situation where it can access you, or you will be exposed to it. Period. There's no other way. There's nothing else. Everything else is stubborn rejection of truth. Now, mind you, one problem that we have is that people have been being told falsehoods, partial truths, and so this has added to this kind of reaction from people. Some are acting on false information. So the Lord has led me to put together all this information, all this particular research that is now available today in this particular time of the pandemic, to help to break through that false information that is leading people to make dangerous, deadly decisions, to hold services, to go out about their daily lives as if there's no virus, as if it's not the threat that it is. That was the terrible thing of it. Every one of those persons didn't have to die. The warnings were sufficient. They were given long enough. And only total rejection of the warnings was why everyone, so many people died. That was the whole message. The deaths I saw, not one had to take place. When you don't follow the mandates of the Lord, you pay a price. And we have mandates of God that we obey authorities. We obey governing authorities, governing human authorities, and they have been telling us to stay at home, don't go in large groups. And they haven't isolated it to church, but there's some going around wanting to make it into, they're accepting that dart from the enemy, they want to make it to something that's just against Christianity, and by that way getting people to lose their power of discernment and just defiantly do that. And as a result, they're leading to needless infections, needless suffering, needless deaths. And this is the message from this prophetic dream. This is the message the Lord wants to be made known now. He wants it to be made known now to quiet the rebellion the enemy has succeeded to do, to have taken even lives of Christians, lives of many Christians, caused suffering, death, and robbery. They haven't been just confined to parishioners. They have been also, leaders themselves have perished by not heeding the warnings that the Lord has put out there through the communities. You're supposed to heed the warnings and not gather in group, reject the enemy's dart that it is against the faith, when we can even look back in the past and we can even see that the Seattle Daily Times in the 1918 Spanish flu had a big headline. And what is the first word of the headline? Churches. Then schools, shows, closed. And I want to point out, it was done alphabetically and not because there was anything against churches. And beneath that, epidemic puts ban on all public assemblies. And that is the sound reason why there are these orders that these places are to remain closed, because as the Lord showed me, to defy that, to disregard that, will put one in the midst of the raindrops. These raindrops that are as defined excellently by that doctor, that doctor in Nashville. He went to explain that these raindrops are these gatherings that where transmission will take place from this close contact, and these raindrops are going to cause a flooding that is going to result in the deaths. And the Lord wants this message put out there to break the enemy's lies that have caused many in the church to rebel and defy these rules, these warnings put in place to preserve life.